Hello everyone, please like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss our stories.
The breath of dawn is a soft sigh across the village of Thao Nguyen, deep in the folds of old mountains and endless fields of waving grass. Here, the world seems to turn at its own gentle pace, hushed and unhurried, as if each moment lingers a little longer in the air before it passes by. On this edge of time, cradled by a stretch of green that never seems to end, stands a small wooden house whose walls remember every story spoken within them. This house, nestled quietly as if trying not to disturb the stillness, is built of pine logs worn smooth by decades of sun and rain. Its roof of red clay tiles gathers moss like an old friend gathering secrets, lending the place an ancient, dreaming look. Oak-framed windows, darkened by the years, look out upon the fields with a kind of constant patience. The house itself knows how to listen. To the wind tapping gently at the glass, to the chorus of crickets at dusk, to the soft laughter of a young girl at sunrise. Her name is Lin, 19 years old, with a frame as slight and graceful as a reed by the lakeside. Her hair, dark as a cloudless midnight, tumbles to her waist and is often bound with a faded silk ribbon, a shade between earth and honey, her mother's last cherished gift. Lin wakes while the sky still wears its veil of silvery mist. The world, at this hour, hovers between sleep and waking, and she relishes the hush that promises her another day. Each morning, Lin rises before even the rooster can summon his courage. She slips quietly from beneath her blankets, careful not to rouse the old wood beneath her feet. At the window, framed by a wild braid of bougainvillea, its purple blooms like drops of twilight, she opens the panes to let in the fragrance of dawn. The cool air tastes of grassland and water, of soil awakened by dew. She sits at a table, small and worn, sipping from a cup of tea that warms her hands and her thoughts. From this spot, Lin watches the world come alive. Slowly, gently. In the far distance, the first blade of sunlight peers over the crest of Sim Hill, casting its slender golden arrows across the fields. Shadows soften and retreat. Morning's light spreads out over the green expanse, careful at first, like a child tiptoeing through a secret. The grass bends under the touch of a new breeze. Wild daisies, still wet with dew, nod their heads in shy greeting. Somewhere higher up, a small flock of larks greet the day with their delicate, tumbling voices. To others, these fields are merely earth and weeds, useful for hay, nothing more. But to Lin, every blade is a story, every flower a memory. She remembers her childhood here, the scent of wildflowers picked with her mother, hands sticky with sap and laughter, her father teaching her how to tie rags onto a scarecrow, the straw poking through old shirts and hats far too big, the hush of afternoons spent lying in the grass, inventing poems with words that came and went like butterflies. Her small notebook is still thick with those messy, hopeful verses, the only place so far where Lin's dreams have ever traveled beyond the village. The field is home stitched together from glimpses, rain showers, soft and persistent, running past makeshift paper capes, moonlit nights, when grandmother and granddaughter huddled outside naming each silver bead overhead and crafting fairy tales from shadows and starlight. Winter dawns, cold and blue. When Lin stood by the fence, breathing in the chill just to remind herself she was here, alive, present. What she feels for the fields is not just love, but longing. A sense that something unnamed is always calling to her. Some days it seems to hum gently beneath the surface of the grass. Other days, it's quiet as a secret. Whatever it is, it waits for her. A mystery threaded through the morning air, a teasing hope that someday she will answer. Lin traces her fingers along the weathered wood of the window frame, feeling the grooves and knots. A restless wind slips through the open pane, gliding past her hands, bringing with it scents both familiar and mysterious. There is young grass, crisp and bright, wet earth just stirred from dreams, and somewhere underneath, the memory of laughter and lullabies, carried by the echo of her mother's voice. She looks out, gazing past the fence, a modest ring of stones and woven reeds, meant to keep the wildness from spilling too close to the house. The fence marks the edge of her world, but her heart presses ever outward. She wonders, as she often does in these first quiet hours, how far the fields stretch. What lies beyond the gentle undulation of green, beyond the shoulder of Sim Hill? Do other villages wear the morning this softly? Do other girls wake and wonder whether the scent of their own fields is as sweet? I wonder how big the world is beyond the field, Lynn whispers, her words a breath in the dawn. Each syllable slips past her lips and out into the morning, carried on the same wind that stirs the treetops and ruffles the feathers of the larks. No answer comes, but the echo of her curiosity lingers in the air, settling in with the promise of a new day. It would be so easy to remain here forever, gathering days one by one, tending to the small routines, sweeping the floors, folding laundry in the light of the kitchen window, gathering wild herbs for soup, listening for the distant jingle of the fisherman's cart. Yet every morning, Lynn feels the promise of something more. She has not stepped beyond the gate, not even once allowed herself to cross it for anything but chores. But within her, the urge to move, to search, to become something more than this small story, grows quietly stronger. In her eyes, as she watches the pink and gold world bloom, something flickers, almost like the first glint of sunrise on a blade of dew-wet grass. A hope, resilient and shy. For now, the field is enough. Its beauty, its old familiar wildness, its memories that soothe and bind and lift. But beneath it all, Lynn can feel the seed of a promise taking root. One day, she will go. She will step beyond the edge of the only world she has ever known. Not just as someone passing through, but as someone searching for herself, listening for the music the fields have always sung to her from beyond the horizon. For now, she waits. She lives each morning as a quiet prayer, gathering courage as easily as morning light does on her windowsill, knowing that when the time comes, she will know how to answer. Until then, the new day begins, and Lynn remains, watching, wondering, hoping, on the brink of her own unfolding story. That afternoon, as the hours drifted softly onward, the sky transformed in ways Lynn had never seen before. No longer was the light sharp and golden, but instead, it turned amber, pouring itself gently over the fields. The sunlight felt less like a torch and more like a delicate veil, wrapping the world in a glow as thin as silk. Shadows melted into gentle hues on the grass, turning the green into a soft, sleepy blend, and even the tallest reeds swayed as though under some dreamlike spell. A thin, diaphanous mist hovered in the air, not quite fog yet, not mere humidity, giving every shape in the field a quality of unreality. Each petal, blade, and stalk was outlined not only in light, but also in a feeling that the world itself was pausing for something special. Lynn sat beneath the broad branches of the old banyan tree, leaning against its solid, rough trunk. The fence beside her, now half collapsed and softened by time, creaked occasionally as the wind nudged it. In her lap, a battered leather notebook lay open. The pages inside were faded and lined with poems, some awkward, some lovely, all written in a slanting, eager hand. They were little pieces of her heart, memories set down in words that stretched back through the years. For a while, Lynn lost herself in those memories, the poems carrying her through seasons and stories. Then a breeze rose, a curious wind, softer and more knowing than before. It wove carefully around her, gentle but attentive, as if it were reading over her shoulder. It slipped through her hair, making it ripple like grass in a field, then brushed her cheek as tenderly as a friend's hand. As it circled her, leaves from the banyan and the field beyond began to swirl into the air, caught in a spiral dance. They spun and twirled with quiet joy, before settling into a perfect ring around her crossed legs, as though making her a nest in the grass, something safe and secret. That was when Lynn heard it, a sound so soft, so easily mistaken for imagination, that she almost turned back to her poems. It was not the wind, not the whispering of the tree, not the faint hum of insects stretching into the late afternoon. No, this was more subtle, and it came from everywhere and nowhere at once, from within the earth, from the air, from deep inside her own chest. A voice barely shaped into words, yet clear as a bell to her soul. Lynn, don't just look from afar anymore. On the other side of the field, there's something waiting for you, Lynn felt the world stop for a moment. Her heart skipped, then began to race. Was this her daydream, or did something truly call to her? For so long, her familiar world was made of routines and boundaries, of small tasks and duties, kindness and care, all safe within the borders of Thao Nguyen village and the encircling fields. Lynn had always been the sensible one. She tended the garden with her grandmother, embroidered scarves for neighbors, and helped teach the youngest children in the village the first letters of the alphabet. The outside had always been described to her as uncertain at best, dangerous at worst. A place of deep, wild forests frequented by loneliness, where no one from the village ever wandered. And yet, the breeze had changed. It was impossible to ignore its gentleness, the almost familiar warmth it carried, the sense of reassurance she felt. It was not frightening, but steady and expectant. Welcoming. It felt as if a friend, long unseen, was beckoning her with a smile. As Lynn wondered if she'd only imagined the invitation, the wind responded again. A solitary dandelion puff, fragile and perfectly round, detached from its stalk and danced through the air. It floated on the breeze until it bobbed at eye level, then drifted gently to the ground, landing right at Lynn's bare feet. Its feathery seeds still clung fast, unscattered, a sign that nothing had disturbed it but the wind's intention. With care, Lynn leaned down. Her fingers, well practiced in delicacy from embroidering fine patterns, lifted the dandelion. It was surprisingly light, but the meaning it carried felt weighty. She held it gently, not wanting to disturb its perfection. As she cradled the flower, Lynn felt her nose prickle and her eyes sting. The world seemed quieter, more expectant. She let herself remember how, since childhood, she had always chosen reason and caution. How she never ventured farther than the edge of the field, always afraid of what others warned her about. But today, the idea of going beyond the boundary no longer felt impossible. Instead, excitement quivered in her chest. She glanced back at the house. Her grandmother slept, peaceful and undisturbed. No one was watching. There were no physical barriers, just the ones she had always imagined. Then the wind changed again, gaining a new layer of scent. The crispness of wild daisies and the warm, spiced hint of dried cinnamon bark. It was an aroma Lynn had never smelled before, not here, yet it struck her as oddly familiar, a fragrance from some half-remembered dream. The longing in her heart intensified. Taking a steadying breath, Lynn slowly pushed herself to her feet. She held the dandelion as if it were a secret promise. Before her, the narrow trail traced the edge of the fields, sparkling with the last light of afternoon, still undampened by evening dew. Each forward step was hesitant, careful, but also filled with a growing resolve. With each movement, she felt another invisible thread from her old, cautious self loosen and vanish. She began to walk, one deliberate step after another, trusting in nothing but the pull of the wind, the steadiness of her feet, and the pulse of hope in her heart. As she moved out from the safe shade of the banyan, the light embraced her. High above, a flock of larks wheeled westward as though leading the way. At the edge of vision, where the land touched the horizon and everything shimmered honey gold, something bright and indefinable shimmered, calling her onward. Lynn did not know what waited for her beyond the field, whether mystery, challenge, or joy. She only knew she could not go back, not now, not after she had heard the wind truly call her name. She walked forward, carried not by certainty, but by the deep, exhilarating freedom of curiosity and hope. For the first time, Lynn was answering the invitation she had always felt, and stepping bravely into whatever lay beyond the known. The narrow path beneath Lynn's feet wound like a ribbon of soft silk, meandering gently through the verdant grass, its outline veiled under the slanted rays of honey-colored afternoon sunlight. With every step, the world behind her faded, and the gentle wind at her back seemed both companion and guide, sometimes nuzzling her cheek with the lightest whisper, other times swirling determinedly about her ankles, as if urging her to keep moving forward. In that moment, Lynn felt suspended between known and unknown, between the cautious thrum of her heart and the unspoken promise the breeze carried with it. Empty-handed, save for the modest scarf of smoky wool draped lightly across her shoulders and a scrap of paper nestling at the edge of her notebook, Lynn set out with nothing but intention. On that slip, written with trembling determination just before she stepped through her gate, were 4 words. I'm ready. The words glowed faintly in her mind. A small talisman to ward off uncertainty. A whisper to herself that she was prepared for what lay beyond the familiar routines of her village life. Nearly an hour passed as Lynn walked, the hush of the grasslands giving her solace. Overhead, clouds drifted lazily, shadows playing tag on the fields. She let her thoughts wander as the landscape shifted, until the world before her suddenly changed. The grass parted, and Lynn found herself standing at the edge of a small, sunken valley. There, a sea of dandelions unfurled in every direction, their delicate heads glowing white and gold, trembling lightly in the wind's arms. Each blossom looked so impossibly fragile, crisp and pale as the season's first snowfall, yet innumerable. The air shimmered with drifting seeds that spun and danced, turning sunlight into a hazy veil. For a fleeting instant, Lynn doubted what she saw, convinced she had stumbled into the boundary between waking and dream. The valley seemed cut from some other world, one where wonder was not only possible but inevitable. In the heart of that living sea, Lynn's breath caught. She saw him, an unexpected presence in the midst of solitude. The young man sat upon a broad, flat stone under a solitary willow. Its slender branches curled low, creating a canopy of green that cast dappled patterns across his figure. He wore an ivory linen shirt and khaki pants, their cuffs rolled up as though he had crossed a shallow brook to reach this silent cathedral of flowers. Over one shoulder, a canvas satchel slumped, well-worn and dusted with travel's memory. In his hands he held a sketchbook, the pages bent and well-thumbed, and a charcoal pencil so used its tip was dulled with earnest effort. The afternoon sun, filtering through willow leaves, painted subtle gold along his hair and caught the quiet lines of his face, soft and contemplative. At once, Lynn felt a curious certainty blossom in her chest. Rather than startled or afraid, she felt an unexplainable peace, as if the fabric of this moment had been waiting patiently for her to step inside it, woven by time and weather and the breath of the dandelions themselves. There was something in the air, a reverberation behind the silence, that made her feel less like a visitor and more like someone returning home to a part of herself long forgotten. The young man, with such stillness that it seemed he had always belonged to the willow and the wind, at last looked up. His eyes met Lynn's, unwavering, clear. There was no hint of surprise in that gaze, nor any questions. Instead, there was something deeper, stillness, understanding, a quiet recognition as if he had already traced the shape of this very moment upon the pages of his sketchbook, waiting only for Lynn to materialize before him. The silence that grew between them was tender, deliberate, full of gentle expectations. "You're here," the young man said, his voice low and carrying a softness that seemed to settle the air around them. Lynn's heart answered with a startled beat. She felt vulnerable and exposed, standing on the threshold between her old world and this other flower-filled realm. But she did not shrink away. "Do you know me?" she managed, her voice as slight as wind passing through willow leaves. "It's not that I know," he replied, a smile flickering on his lips, subtle as the drifting dandelion seeds, "but I feel that you would come." The words filtered through Lynn like sunlight, simple yet profound. He set aside his sketchbook, letting it rest on the smooth stone, and with a gesture, gentle, inviting, he patted the space beside him. Lynn approached, her hesitation brief, her footsteps muffled by the softness of the grass. She sat, heart quickening, not from fear but from the sense of arrival, as if the world itself was shifting to let her in. They sat together beneath the willow, surrounded on all sides by the endless white tide of dandelions, petals swirling around them in spontaneous celebration. The leaves hung like curtains, offering shelter from everything except the light. "I'm Min," the young man continued, his gaze drifting toward the edge of the field. "I'm a painter. I travel from place to place, searching for corners of the world where something sacred dwells. When I first found this field, I knew I had to stop. There's a quiet here that fills the soul." Lynn listened, struck by the truth of his words, the cadence of his voice winding through her like a melody only she could hear. He spoke not merely of places, but of feelings, those glimmers that can't be chained to words yet linger long after the moment has passed. And you? Min turned to her now, his attention gentle, his eyes steady. What brought you here? Lin paused, searching for an answer. She realized she did not fully know, yet her heart responded before her mind could catch up. For years she had gazed across these fields from the edge of her world, content to watch, anonymous and unchanging. Today, something inside called her forward, a yearning, a hesitation finally let go. The wind, the light, the simple longing to belong not only to memory, but to the living, breathing now. Because the wind called, she confessed, her voice uncertain but honest. And I don't want to be just an observer anymore. I want to step into the story. Min nodded, as if he had always known that was exactly why she had come, as if there could never have been any other answer. In the hush that settled over the valley, words became superfluous. Together they watched as the sun crept lower, gilding the dandelions and setting the sky aglow with hues of amber and rose. High above, a flock of swallows traced gentle arcs, their wings carving patterns in the fading light, leaving only the memory of a pink cloud trailing in their wake. Lin looked at her hand, surprised to find a dandelion petal had settled there and remained, untouched by the breeze. Beside her, Min sat quietly, not as a stranger, but as someone called forth from a part of her memory she had not yet unfolded. In the field of white flowers, beneath the promise of the evening sky, two lives met and began to weave a new pattern, gentle, sacred, and filled with quiet wonder. As the sun gently retreated beyond the horizon, it cast its last faint shadows over the field, leaving every blade and blossom tinged with a memory of warmth. Slowly, the world folded itself into the arms of the encroaching night, that ancient velvet curtain swathing everything it touched, flowers bending in the hush, grasses cradling secrets, and beneath the stretches of low-hanging willow branches, two quiet figures lost to their own thoughts. Silence did not descend abruptly. Instead, it crept in softly, gentle as a sigh, lending the world a rare softness that seemed both infinite and tender. From his humble bag, Min brought out a well-worn lighter, its surface dulled by years of use. With measured care, he kindled a flame among the dry wood he'd gathered earlier. The little fire hesitated, sputtered, then found its vigor, sending up a small, steady blaze that painted their faces and hands in shades of honey gold. The flickering light reached bravely into the darkness, shifting and swaying as if it too wished to dance beneath the open sky. In the stillness that enveloped the field, everything ordinary became transformed. Gone were the carefree daylight sounds, the cheerful trill of birds, the playful laughter of the wind, the vibrant chatter of colors cascading in sunlight. Now there remained only the chorus of crickets, their song rising and falling in secret patterns all around, the wind moving through reeds and wildflowers, casting a low, rhythmic hum across the open land, and that deeper silence that waits only for the truly attentive. Under this canopy, the world felt vaster yet somehow closer, as though every breath and heartbeat resonated with the night. Min reached into his bag again, this time producing 2 sweet potatoes, each carefully wrapped in banana leaves to preserve their warmth. He handed one to Lin, his hand lingering an extra moment before he let go. Lin accepted it, and as the soft heat seeped into her palm, she felt an unexpected comfort settle in her chest, blooming quietly. A gentle inquiry cracked the night's serene spell. Min's tone was soft, undemanding, the words rising and falling with the distant cricket song. He asked if Lin often found herself outside at such an hour, as if the open wildness of the field and the night sky were a rare adventure rather than a commonplace occurrence. Lin's reply was just as gentle, her voice barely more than a whisper. She admitted she had never wandered so far from the warmth of familiar walls after sunset. But tonight, she confessed, nestled close to the fire's glow and with him beside her, she was not afraid. Words drifted between them, fragile and few, then fell away, edged out by comfortable silence. Min, after a moment's pause, reached for his sketchbook. The firelight made shifting patterns on the pages as he held it open, the drawings etched in careful, deliberate lines. Lin caught a glimpse, and recognition stopped her breath. It was her, captured in a moment he must have stolen with his eyes and memory, seated by a window with the vast wilds of the field behind her. He had drawn her hair swept back with a ribbon, her hands curved around a cup as if cradling all her secret thoughts. The revelation hung in the air like a promise. Lin's voice trembled as she asked when he had drawn her image. Min hesitated, searching for words that could bridge the gap between intention and confession. He admitted quietly that it had been just the week before. Her face had lingered in his mind, waiting to be translated into pencil and paper. Each time he looked toward the distant village, he imagined someone waiting there, someone with eyes just as deep and questioning. A hush settled once again, deeper somehow than before. The fire's glow softened, its flames dipping low, as if it too sensed the new intimacy. The air was laced with the lingering scent of late-night blossoms, a fragrance so rare and delicate it seemed woven from moonlight. They let the silence speak for them, signaled only by the quiet ticking of time marked in the slow pour of moments, like the gradual cooling of tea left untouched on a winter's night. Far above, the sky unfurled in all its midnight grandeur. Stars awoke, blinking into being one by one, casting their cold brilliance across the heavens. Each glowing point was like a distant watcher, patient and timeless, bearing witness to the small courage of hearts willing to dream. It was Lin who finally broke the stillness. Her question came like a breeze, tender and searching. Did Min believe in destiny? She asked not with the urgency of one desperate for hope, but with the curiosity of someone afraid to believe for herself. Min turned his gaze skyward, tracing invisible patterns among the constellations. He replied quietly that he did not place his faith in fate's unseen threads. Instead, he believed in the miracle of moments, those rare and inexplicable times when two paths crossed and strangers recognized themselves in each other for no reason at all. A slow, genuine sigh found its way to Lin's lips. A smile unburdened, without pretense or caution. She lay back into the tall grass, letting it cradle her as she stared upward. Min, sensing the new gravity of the moment, stretched out beside her. They lay close enough to share the warmth of the fire and the rhythm of their breathing, yet just apart. Separate and yet not lonely. Lin spoke then, voice so faint it nearly melted into the night. She admitted to dreaming of flying away, escaping to some unknown place, but confessed she never knew where she would go. Perhaps, she thought, it was because there had never been anyone close enough to share such a journey. Min's answer was barely more than a whisper, shaped by the quiet certainty of someone who had waited a long time for precisely this moment. Tonight, he promised, she did not need to go alone any longer. The moon, now rising, draped the field in silvery grace. Its light caught the dew on every leaf, transforming the ordinary meadow into a kingdom spun from dreams. The fire might have ebbed, but within its circle still flickered the fragile beginnings of something rare and true. Dandelions nodded in the moonlit breeze, whispering ancient secrets, while above, stars etched silent promises into the night. And so, beneath the limitless vault of the sky, in a field that belonged to no one and everyone, two souls discovered each other. Not with grand declarations, but with the quiet courage to be present. In the hush of the night, warmed by the smallest fire and shielded by the silent witnesses of wind and willow, they touched, gently, sincerely, and profoundly, as if they were both waking for the very first time to the astonishment of love. The first shy rays of dawn crept through the wooden window, their gold-threaded touch stretching across the quiet room and softly illuminating Lin's face. She awoke not to the sounds that usually marked the world's awakening, the lively chatter of birds or the stirring hush of wind through bamboo, but to a hush more profound. It was a gentle, empty space within her heart, the kind that lingers when a song ends, the final vibrations echoing in memory while the air grows still. It was the quiet herald of something shifting, something just out of reach. Outside, night's fingers still clung to the fields. Mist weaved slow and spectral through the grass, veiling the distant paddies and tree lines, as if reluctant to yield the world back to day. The horizon itself was a brushstroke of blurred gray and peach, uncertain and full of promise. Lin slipped from her bed, her feet bare against the smooth wood, and walked toward the porch. The boards were cool under her skin, her steps careful but certain as she crossed the threshold into the hazy morning air. As her gaze swept the familiar yard, she saw Min standing by the great kapok tree, the one that greeted every visitor at the start of the village. Its branches, heavy with clusters of red blossoms, glowed like coals in the soft dawn light. Min, already prepared for the journey, held a battered sketchbook in one hand and his old cloth bag in the other. They had always known, in that secret place where words didn't belong, that this day would eventually arrive. But knowing and feeling, Lynn realized, were different things. She crossed the yard, the grass cool and slick with dew beneath her feet, and for a heartbeat every sound sharpened. The drip of water from a leaf, the rustle of her skirt, the steady breath in her chest. Each moment stretched, delicate as a spider web drawn through light. Standing close to Min, she spoke, her words woven from both hope and ache. Asking if he was truly leaving, her voice held steady, but her eyes betrayed the light that flickered and wavered within. Min nodded, and his smile was gentle, softened by sun and memory. He spoke about belonging to the road, to the wind and the stories still lingering ahead. His presence was quiet reassurance, his calm a gift. The sun, rising higher, painted their shadows long against the dust. Lynn studied him, the gentle lines at the corners of his eyes, evidence of laughter shared late at night, the coal-black marks on his fingers, reminders of drawings created in secret, traded for stories by the fire. She memorized it all, feasting on every detail as though they might fill the empty spaces opening inside her. She asked, with a sad but playful tilt to her lips, if he had left anything behind for her. At this, Min thumbed through his sketchbook, careful and deliberate, until he reached the middle pages. He slipped out a drawing, a tender image of Lynn herself, seated by the window, her gaze searching the horizon, painted not with realism, but with memory. He explained it was how he first saw her, before they ever met, a glimpse through both pain and imagination. Lynn accepted the drawing, curling her fingers protectively around the delicate paper. It felt fragile, like holding a scrap of a dream, or the memory of laughter that comes just before sleep. She pressed the picture to her heart, allowing herself a moment to truly feel the farewell that shimmered between them. She did not cry. She simply breathed, letting her heart swell with the knowledge that even brief, fleeting love could leave a mark deeper than time. Then Min, quietly, asked what she would leave for him. The unspoken hope in his eyes made the morning brighter despite its sorrow. Lynn stepped closer. She unraveled the ribbon from her hair, a simple strip of indigo linen sun-faded at the edges, but rich with the scent of wildflowers and home. With careful hands, she tied it onto the strap of his bag, fastening a piece of herself to his journey. She told him to carry it with him, a fragment of the peace and solace that belonged to this place, to them. Min met her gaze and nodded, understanding as only those who have truly listened can. He shouldered his bag, the ribbon fluttering, and turned towards the open road. Each step away was deliberate, not rushed, but inevitable. He walked across the red earth path, between the silent ranks of bamboo, his form becoming less distinct as the mist unraveled with the cresting sun. He did not look back, trusting Lynn to release him, trusting the dawn to carry him forward. Lynn remained at the foot of the kapok tree, her face lifted toward a sky now awash with expanding light. The breeze moved through her clothes, urging her to let go, to breathe out sorrow and inhale the gentle certainty of change. Clusters of red flowers fell in slow motion, each petal swirling toward earth, reminders that memories, once cherished, don't simply vanish. They become part of the land, fragmenting gently into every familiar place. But Lynn did not weep, for something vital inside her had shifted. She was no longer simply a girl who observed the world through glass, who measured love in daydreams and distant music. She was transformed. By the shared looks, the footpaths wandered in silence, the words exchanged beneath tattered constellations. Even loss, she understood, could be a miracle. A force powerful enough to awaken parts of the soul that lay sleeping. Returning quietly to her home, Lynn found a place for Min's drawing on the wall opposite the window. Her window, the one that once separated her from the world. Each morning after, as the sun lit the paper, she would see herself not as someone who waited for change, but as the maker of it. She passed through the fields, her fields, no longer fleeing but seeking. Every blade of grass, Every ray of sunlight was an invitation to explore the unknown territories within herself. And as each day passed, Lynn discovered that the journey she'd begun needed no companion for guidance. For she had learned at last to follow the soft but persistent voice within, the one that whispered of courage, of hope, of love that transcends endings. Every footstep was a beginning. Every morning was new. The dawn, subtle, glowing, quietly insistent, grew brighter with every passing moment, painting her world with hues she'd never dreamed possible. And so Lynn walked on, surrounded by light, her heart unfolded to the vastness before her, blooming with the promise of change.